Welcome, Ashley Landis. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Mel. How are you?
I'm doing great. So why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and the company you work for, Arcadis?
Sure, yeah. My name is Ashley Landis. I am a university relations recruiter with Arcadis. If you're not sure what Arcadis is, it's a global engineering consulting firm. We are based out of the Netherlands, but we operate regionally. So I work for the North America group. We operate as one with the United States and Canada. So I do all of the entry level and intern recruiting for the water business line. So water, wastewater, water resiliency, all the good stuff. And for all of North America, both US and Canada. I also run our internship program, which is predominantly over the summer months. So I work very closely with our interns through those months and throughout the year when we have co-ops as well.
Very cool. And just so our viewers also know, I used to work at Arcadis, and I would occasionally go with Ashley or her counterpart, Adam, who's also a recruiter, and go to career fairs and other things to rope people in. So I'm a big fan of yours and Adam's. Y'all do great work. And the reason that I wanted to connect with you and record this discussion is because you and I have had a few discussions about some of the struggles that we see entry-level candidates kind of consistently having. And I thought we could put together something nice to address some of those topics we see. So today we're going to start with the resume topic. And we want to acknowledge that every professional has a different opinion on resumes. So Ashley and I might disagree on something, and that just means that there's variation in different leaders at different companies. You can't predict, but I think there's probably some common threads that we can hit on today. So acknowledging that, let's talk a little bit more. So Arcadis, what types of entry-level candidates is the company most commonly recruiting for in the U.S.? I know you're on the water side, but tell us a little more specifics.
Yes. So I have the unique insight that I've worked with all of our business lines here in the United States and Canada. So I've hired for our environment that does a lot of remediation, our infrastructure group working with transportation design and traffic. So I've seen all of those groups and how they work and how they, source and filter through candidates. But our water group predominantly hires civil and environmental engineers. And I would say if I was looking at a main group of majors, those would be the two across all of our business lines that we hire the most. Civil engineering obviously has a very broad spectrum of things that it involves. So we hire civil engineers into our transportation design group, designing bridges or culverts. We do, civil engineers in our water group doing water wastewater treatment. So kind of that would be the biggest bulk. But also in our water group, we do hire mechanical, electrical engineers. We have a lot of instrumentation and controls positions that we hire for. Our environmental group also hires a lot of environmental scientists and geologists, some ecologists. Sometimes you have to have a specialty in knowing what a fire salamander is and where they like to live. There's a lot of different little niche roles as well. But I would say that those would be the overarching, the biggest bulk of our hiring would be in those majors.
I'm so glad that you highlighted that spectrum because the same is true at Carollo. So I work for Carollo now, and it's a much smaller and more specialized firm focused pretty much solely on water and wastewater. But the same thing is true for us, right? We have to have structural engineers and electrical and I&C engineers on staff. Those are important parts of the team. So some similarities there. All right. Mm-hmm. Let's break down a little bit about resume structure and what we like to see on entry-level candidate resumes. So right off the bat, what's the length you want to see?
1 page.
That's right. 1 page.
Period.
Let's start at the top. So I often see an objective statement or sometimes a summary. What's your opinion on that top portion? What do you want to see at the very beginning that pulls you in?
So what I always tell candidates is that, especially when you're applying for a company the size of Arcadis, that gets a lot of applicants, hundreds of candidates for one position, your resume might be the only shot that you have in grabbing the recruiter's attention or the hiring manager's attention. Might be your first and only shot. So keeping it relevant as long as you can. So if you think of the way that eye travels down a sheet of paper, and you're, if you're thinking about a recruiter like myself who is scanning 100 resumes that come in for a job, you want to make sure that you keep the most relevant information on there, that you make sure that you are proving that you line up with that job description as much as possible. So an objective statement, to me, I could take it or leave it. I'm not going to count it against you if you have one. I don't think it's bad, but I do think that you could use the space more wisely if you have relevant experience to put on there. So if you did an amazing capstone project, your senior year that had, some water, wastewater treatment design, something that is for a water engineer position at Arcadis, I would much rather you have, 4 bullets about that capstone project on your resume than 4 lines of, I'm very motivated and goal-oriented, there's just better use of the space.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that. And so I am not a fan of the objective statements for that reason, because it's difficult to draw something really unique out that will stand out. And I think that, as you just stated, when we're at the very top of the resume, it's got to be something that's captivating. So I like to see short summary statements or short summary paragraphs that really embody who the person is and what they're trying to do. Because if they can convey that they're excited about their goals and it aligns with the position, I think that is a potential capture point for the resume reader.
Mm-hmm. I would say that I have found it useful recently, actually, maybe for the first time ever. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I'm hiring a mechanical engineer for our White Plains office, and they need someone who wants to do work in HVAC and fire suppression systems. So that's kind of a niche thing. It's not the typical mechanical engineer interest. We've got people interning for NASA or doing engine, working for for Ford or another auto manufacturer. And that's the typical mechanical experience that we see on all these resumes. I don't see a whole bunch of people coming in with resumes that have I've worked at an internship doing HVAC work. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't happen. But I'm going to say that I did pass a couple of resumes along to a hiring manager because they put in their objective statement that is the kind of work that they wanted to do. I think that an objective statement can hurt people more often than it can help when you don't change it for every job that you apply for.
Yeah.
If you are just using the same resume for every job, that objective statement doesn't help you at all. Because like you said, it's not unique. It doesn't add any value. And you have the added error of, the added chance of error of putting in something like, I want to work in HVAC, when then you send that resume off to another company that the job isn't in HVAC, which we've definitely seen.
Yep.
And I will counter your point too about the objective statement, saying something about your passions, your goals, things like that. Honestly, the best place for that is in your cover letter, and you can get so much more in. But I think that people think of a cover letter as kind of useless because a lot of people don't read it, or, it's just I'm just going to say I am qualified for this and I'm the best person because I have a degree from University of Wisconsin, But the thing is a lot of people don't use that cover letter the way and leverage that space. If you're able to really leverage a cover letter, you can get, what your goals are, what you're passionate about, why you're passionate about this specific company, working for them. You can get relevant experience in there that isn't on your cover letter, maybe, or on your resume. Maybe you say, you bartended through college. Well, we're a consulting firm. You need to be able to talk to people. A customer service facing job is not going to be lost on us. Those skills are important. Maybe you don't have room to put it on your resume, and maybe you have better things to put on your resume. You put that in your cover letter. You know why I know that I can talk to clients and that I can do this is because I've worked in customer service for 4 years. I put myself through school, and you can talk about your hard work, your work ethic, your customer service, all of that stuff. And you can actually put a couple paragraphs together that make you look as a great, well-rounded candidate. And you can get all that stuff instead of just making one sentence. I have a great work ethic and I work really hard. Like, that doesn't have anything behind it.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So I think there's some distinction that we can draw out here. So for the most part, what we're talking about today is when you're doing an online job application. So I would look at that online job application as sort of a cold entry, where you're not coming in through a referral and you're doing this application online. And so maybe someone will take and read your cover letter. And I think in some instances where you're getting referred in, you might want the resume to be speaking more because that's what's going to get passed along. But yeah, I love your point there. And so I think that segues us nicely into the next section of a resume, basically experience. And, I have run into candidates in the past when I was helping them with resumes where they didn't have technical internship experience and they were really concerned about how that looked. And in these cases, they were students who worked in other jobs like the service industry, like you said, and I want to ask your opinion on this. What I encouraged them to do was to put some kind of summary statement at the top of their resume that basically says, point blank, I worked 30, 40, 50 hours a week in this kind of job while maintaining this grade point average in engineering school. And, if you want to have another statement with that, something around why you had to do that and the responsibilities that you carried. My thought there being that if a company doesn't value that hard work that you put in, even though it's not a, industry specific internship, it's probably not who you want to work for anyway. What do you think about an approach like that?
I think that definitely would stand out because most of the time, if you don't have, an internship, people are wondering what you did, So if you get that out of the way right off the bat and you say in your first sentence, like I worked this many hours. I know that I just hired someone, I don't know, probably 6 months ago now, that had kind of the similar situation. He took, I think, 6 years getting his bachelor's degree, but he was working the whole time. He was working full-time hours, He also, tried really hard to try and leverage whatever whatever knowledge and skills that he was building during those jobs that he had during school and being able to show how that related. I think that's one thing that a lot of students don't think about. And I always encourage them to do that, is to think about those relatable skills. You don't have to necessarily, have done exactly the job to still have some of the skills be building those skills in customer service, being able to talk to clients. Client is just another term. It can be used in a different situation, a different industry, as a customer, as a lot of different things. Before I was a recruiter, I worked as a probation officer and, translating those skills of managing a bunch of clients in that situation, a bunch of a caseload. Now I have a requisition load of all these different jobs that I manage and different hiring managers that are my clients, even though they're internal. But like, you have to think about the way that you word things on your resume so that you can convey those skills, even if they don't match up completely.
I love that. And part of what you're describing is selling yourself, right? And I think another thing that I want to mention that young candidates need to understand is in the consulting world, we live by selling our work to other businesses. And so the interpersonal skills are pretty important, from interacting with clients and also interacting with team members, because we don't do anything alone. Everything we do is a team effort. So I really like what you were saying there about rephrasing things and selling yourself. And it's really owning the hard work that you did.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, you're being able to, you have a 3.9 GPA and you work 30 hours a week during school. Obviously, you can manage your time, and that's super important in consulting for sure.
All right. So let's talk about the experience or project work section for entry-level candidates. We're hitting on this a little bit, but what do you like to see?
So going back to what we were just talking about, somebody who maybe didn't have an internship, in a relevant field, I always recommend that they put those on there, their school projects. I always also recommend, and I just had some phone screens last week where I asked students what classes they were in now. They are finishing up a semester before they come into an internship in the summer. What classes are you in right now? What projects are you working on right now? Because that's all information that you will have, experience you'll have under your belt before you start an internship this summer. So you need to give yourself credit for it. So that's one of the things I always recommend. I know that some, I've heard students tell me that career services have told them, well, it's not a job. You can't put it on your resume as experience. But when you think about if a manager is going to hire you, let's say for an internship, and they're looking at your resume, and they see, you work at, you're working retail, let's say. That's great. Again, transferable skills like we talked about, but also they want to know what you're learning in your classes that are going to make you a solid intern. What classes have you taken? Because you could take them in different orders than your colleague in the desk next to you. You could take different classes within a civil engineering degree. There's a million different ways you can go. Did you take hydraulics already? Did you take fluid mechanics already? We don't know. And the degree at Georgia Tech is different than a degree at Michigan State. So, you're not required to take the exact same classes or do the same projects. So your education is unique to you. You chose the electives you chose. You chose the path that you chose, the specialty you chose. So you need to make sure that that's showing, especially if you're looking for a water engineering position. We need to know that you took the right water classes to give you the good foundation to get you into that position. If you're taking all structural engineering classes, are you going to be the best fit for that water engineer position? So I would say that it's very important, especially if you don't have internship experience, to put those classes in and don't put just a list of your classes, but say, I took fluid mechanics, spring 2020, and this is what we learned. This was objectives of the class, or this was the project I took.
Right. And so that is the point I really want to highlight is don't just list the class name. You want to highlight in there something that you did or learned. So articulate it so that the person reading your resume can see, okay, they learned this skill. They learned how to use this modeling software.
Yes.
Yeah. So I disagree with, what you heard the students hearing from, I don't know, whoever it was. I think it's okay to showcase your educational project experience as part of your experience. You just have to be able to show it in a way, sell your experience in a way that we can, essentially use it to your advantage.
Yeah. And another thing, you have to think about these projects that you're taking on. Everyone loves the group projects that you have to do in college. They're always great fun, but maybe you took on the project manager role. Maybe you were the one who did all the research. Maybe you were the one that was the go-between between your group and the consulting company that was helping mentor your group, for that project. So putting the specific little task, the role that you took on in that project really shows like what you usually lean into. Like our water resiliency group, seeing someone who did all the research or did like, the grant writing, the proposal, that kind of thing, the technical writing aspect, they'd be like, that's awesome. That's what we need, whereas another one's like, oh, well, they took on the project manager role in their group project. That means they like to take on that oversight and see all the little pieces of it. And it makes them know a little bit more about you and what kinds of roles you lean into and what you're good at.
I want to make a plug here for Capstone Projects, because doing the environmental capstone project with a water focus allowed us to do the competition that the Water Environment Federation kind of sponsors. And it starts at a state level where your universities can compete. And then if you do well, you can get sponsored essentially to attend WEFTEC and present there. And so that's what my group got to do. And it ended up being just a really important opportunity to meet people, to showcase our ability to present and build our networks, our professional networks. So I highly recommend get enthusiastic about your capstone project and use it to your advantage as much as you can. All right. So thank you so much for that. I feel like that kind of packages up the experience and education sections nicely. Ashley, is there anything that you've seen in resumes in those sections that you don't like and that you would recommend our young viewers to be cognizant of?
Well, nothing really specifically to those two. The most problematic things that I typically see on resumes are more so formatting, to be honest. A lot of people try and get fancy with their formatting. I actually got a resume last week or a couple weeks ago. Who knows what time it is? But it had a background that looked like confetti.
Oh, no.
It looked like triangles and dashes of all different fluorescent colors. And I just thought, oh my gosh, who thought this was a good idea? It wasn't good. And I could never send that on to a hiring manager. The hiring manager would be like, what were they thinking? Because that's what I thought. But so instead, I reached out to the student. And the only reason, I'm going to be honest, I reached out to the student was because he didn't have a bad resume. He didn't need that. Like, I think some people think they need to grab your attention by putting like a fluorescent green name on it or putting your picture. There's a lot of people who go back and forth about a picture. I am in the camp that says no picture if you're submitting it through an ATS system, online application style. If you're going to a networking event, put your picture on it, give them your business card so they have a face, but otherwise, no. But yeah, you don't need all these, kitschy things to get your attention if you have the content on your resume. He had a good resume. I wanted to pass it on to my manager and I couldn't because it looked like that. So I had to go back to him and ask, can you please give me a standard format resume without this background so that I can pass this on?
Oh, that's so funny. Help me, help you.
Yes. A lot of people, there's companies out there that will sell you a resume template, right? It's like hexagons and fancy stuff to put your information in. And to be honest with you, they are making money. I mean, they're selling you templates, they're selling you a program, whatever. They don't necessarily care if you get a job. So, I mean, you have to think twice about the way that you're applying. Like Mel said, things are different when you're applying through a referral. Things are different if you're applying for a marketing position or a design, like you're going to be an interior designer, then maybe you want to have a different fancy artistic format on your resume. If you're applying to be an engineer and you're applying to a company that gets 500 applicants in a position, if you don't present the information easily to read or in a searchable format, which a lot of those hexagons and fancy formats aren't actually searchable in an ATS system, which is a big problem. If I go in and I search a pool of candidates and I say, I need someone with AutoCAD, your resume won't get pulled up because it's not searchable.
Tell the viewers, what does ATS stand for?
Oh, sorry. It's an applicant tracking system. Okay. So large companies and basically everyone at this point, when you apply online, your application goes into an applicant tracking system. So we as recruiters have all of our candidates apply to their one job. We go into that job and we search through those candidates. We look for different keywords. We look for different skills that the manager has said, this is a must-have, and we'll search for those things. And if your resume is in a funky format, it might not pull up. It might not be searchable by the ATS. So that's a big issue that I've seen, is just the weird formats. When I actually saw a study pop on LinkedIn the other day that was talking about how, easily readable down the way your eye just naturally goes, right? The easy bullets, clean, simple sentences. It's the easiest thing to read, and it's the easiest thing. You're not training someone to read your resume in the moment.
Right. So a couple of takeaways there. I think if you were going to spend money to get help with your resume, you're better off spending money on a writer that has a good reputation and using them to help get your content really on point versus formatting. Simple, clean formatting for the systems that you're submitting to, making them easy to process, and then also making it easy for the reader to just go down your resume and see everything clearly. The other thing that I wanted to mention on what you said is you said you get lots of applicants. 100 plus applicants for one position. Those are low odds. So I talk about this on other videos. I'll talk about it more in the future coming up here. But to improve your odds, you have got to network. You have to build your professional network. I believe that the easiest way to do that is through professional organizations, and I'll talk about those. And you can also get more skilled at networking on LinkedIn. So other things that we'll cover in the future. Okay, Ashley, to wrap up our resume discussion here, let's talk about extracurriculars. What do you want to see in organizational or school activity involvement? What do you like to see in that section that's usually at the bottom of resumes?
Yeah, I actually wanted to bring this up earlier, but I knew we were going to talk about it, so I waited. So honestly, again, I'm talking from my experience in the consulting world. And like Mel has said, we are in the business of selling ourselves. We are selling our skills to our clients. We are trying to show them what we have. And networking is a big part of that. Being able to be client facing is a big part of that. So we do value those extracurriculars. We value you being engaged in those extra things, being so passionate about your career and what you're doing that you take time out of your, time away from school to invest more into it, right? So ASCE, Engineers Without Borders, Society of Women Engineers. The list goes on. There's so many different organizations you can be a part of. And a lot of different ones on different campuses have different names, but kind of the same thing. And I would say one of the biggest things, and it's most common when I read a resume that I see the extracurriculars and it says ASCE or ASCE member, this date till present, SWE member, this date to present. I get it. Not everybody can be the vice president of ASCE, But you can also talk about projects that you were involved in with them, because those groups always do projects. Engineers Without Borders has rotating projects year round. You're doing the design work, you're doing the implementation, in Ghana or wherever you're going, So there's all these different things that you can be involved in that group. So make sure you're giving yourself credit for it. I mean, if you're not doing it, obviously you're not going to put on there that you're doing something you're not doing. But if you are involved in the design aspect or the research aspect of a project with one of those, put it on there. Just put one extra bullet. You can free up the space to do that, because it does count for something. It shows that you're not just coming to the meeting once every 6 months. You're actually doing things with them.
Right, because we know that when you're a student, those things are usually free to join. And so membership alone doesn't mean a whole lot. But what does mean a lot is everything Ashley just described, your engagement, anything that you've volunteered for, those types of things demonstrate your dedication, and they tell a story about you that helps us understand you better as a candidate. So I love that. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Yeah.
Okay, let's wrap this up. Ashley is going to join me for another discussion on interviews. So stay tuned and check out that video when we post it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.